Picture this: Los Angeles, 1979. Backstage at the iconic Troubadour. The place is buzzing, guitars wailing through sound checks, drinks clinking, legends passing through the halls. Then suddenly, chaos. A young assistant bursts into the promoter's office, visibly shaken. Linda Ronstadt just stormed out of the green room again. The reason? A single name on the performance list. Not hers, not the Eagles, his. One look and she was gone. No confrontation, no questions. Just an icy exit and dead silence. For years, no one understood what really happened that night. And Linda? She never explained. No public feuds, no tabloid-worthy tantrums, just perfectly composed interviews and an image of unshakable grace. For decades, she kept that silence intact. But now the silence is shattered. In a rare moment of raw honesty, Linda Ronstadt is finally revealing the 7 musicians she never forgave. The ones who bruised her pride, challenged her artistry, exposed the darkest side of the music industry. These aren't harmless spats or fading grudges. These are the stories that defined an entire era of rock and roll power plays. Broken loyalties, quiet revenge. The most shocking part? Some of the names on this list were once her closest allies. First, Don Henley, the drummer who got too big for his own beat. Before the Eagles became rock royalty, Don Henley was just Linda's drummer and backup singer, grateful for the spotlight she gave him. In the early 1970s, Linda Ronstadt was the rising star, packing theaters coast to coast. Henley was the quiet guy behind the kit, soaking up the momentum of her fame. She gave him his first big break. But as the Eagles took flight, everything changed. Suddenly, Henley wasn't humble anymore. His ego grew in lockstep with the band's success. The group that once opened for Linda now strutted through Sunset Boulevard like they owned it. Henley in particular began acting like the king of the canyon, brushing off the woman who helped launch his career. The breaking point came in 1975. Backstage at the Universal Amphitheater, Henley made a comment that still stings. He mocked Linda's musical direction. He sneered that she should stick to covers and let real songwriters speak. The words weren't just insulting, they were dismissive of everything she had built with grit, heart, and pure talent. Linda didn't just walk out. She revoked his tour credentials on the spot. No second chances. In private, she'd later call him a climber who lost his soul chasing fame. But Henley wasn't the only one who crossed the line. Second, Jim Morrison. The night Jim Morrison crossed the line. It was 1968. The summer of love had passed. The Doors were electric, burning through every stage they touched. And Linda Ronstadt was still fighting tooth and nail to carve out her place in a male-dominated industry. That night, at a private after-party near the Whiskey A Go-Go, legends and misfits mixed freely. But no one expected what happened when Jim Morrison spotted Linda. He was already several drinks in, shirt half unbuttoned, swaggering through the crowd mid-performance. In a moment equal parts madness and ego, Morrison pulled Linda on stage without warning. It wasn't planned, it wasn't cute, it was reckless. And then he leaned in. Right in front of everyone, he tried to kiss her. Linda recoiled instinctively. Morrison lost his balance, stumbled into her mic stand, nearly brought the entire setup crashing down. Gasps, stares, whispers. The crowd didn't know whether to laugh or panic. The moment was never caught on camera, but it became underground legend. Passed around backstage for years, Morrison never apologized. In fact, he doubled down. Months later, in a radio interview, he mocked her, called her sweet but spineless, dismissed her as harmless, forgettable. Linda didn't clap back publicly. She never did. But behind closed doors, her words cut deep within her inner circle. She called Morrison a brilliant wreck who poisoned everything around him. Third, Neil Young, protest turned personal. It was 1976. A benefit concert for farm workers had brought together some of the biggest names in rock, including Linda Ronstadt and Neil Young, two artists known not just for their voices, but their convictions. On the surface, they were allies united for a cause they both deeply believed in. But once the spotlight hit, everything changed. Backstage, tensions boiled over when Neil began dismissing Linda's artistic input. He rejected her set suggestions, blocked her from performing certain songs, even criticized her sound as being too commercial. To make things worse, after the show, he reportedly told the press that she wasn't built for protest. The implication was clear. Linda wasn't authentic enough for the fight. She left the venue in tears. It wasn't just an insult, it was a betrayal from someone she had respected, someone she thought stood for the same values. Being painted as hollow by a fellow activist cut deeper than any critic ever could. That night marked a turning point. From that moment on, no matter how noble the cause, Linda never shared a stage with Neil Young again. Fourth, Frank Zappa. When genius becomes cruelty. Their meeting in 1974 had the buzz of something iconic. Frank Zappa, avant-garde, unpredictable, the mad genius of experimental rock. Linda Ronstadt, genre-defining, vocally unstoppable, and on the rise on paper. It was a collaboration that could have redefined boundaries. Instead, it collapsed in a matter of hours. Linda expressed genuine interest in recording one of Zappa's tracks, but as soon as they stepped into the studio, things went sideways. Zappa dismissed her creative suggestions with a smirk, called her sound too sanitized, accused her of trying to water down his music, turning raw art into a jingle fit for car commercials. The tension reached its breaking point during a live rehearsal. In the middle of the session, Zappa stopped the band cold. The room went silent. Then in front of everyone, he sneered, "This is what happens when you hand real music to a pop singer." The room froze. Linda didn't yell, didn't argue. She quietly packed up and walked out. Humiliated, hurt, done. She never returned, never collaborated with Zappa again. Publicly, she said nothing. But behind the scenes, close friends recall her words clearly. She called him brilliant but brutal, a mind she respected, but a man she could never trust again. Fifth, David Crosby, Laurel Canyon's fallout. In the golden haze of Laurel Canyon, Linda Ronstadt and David Crosby were once like musical kin. They shared not just stages and studio time, but an unspoken trust rooted in the countercultural movement they both helped shape. The bond seemed unbreakable, but by 1978, that harmony had turned to tension. During a vocal session for a collaborative track, Linda requested a simple key change, one that would better fit her voice. Crosby refused, brushed her off with a dismissive, "You should learn to adapt." What might have been a minor disagreement quickly snowballed. Heated words were exchanged, and their argument didn't stay in the studio. Within days, it had leaked to the press, turning into one of the most whispered about clashes in the canyon. But it didn't stop there. Crosby went public in Rolling Stone, calling Linda manufactured, implying she was more product than talent. For Linda, who had built her entire career on raw ability and creative instinct, it was a dagger to the heart. She didn't respond in interviews. She never did. But the silence she maintained was anything but passive. She made a quiet but pointed move. She banned his name from being spoken around her band and inner circle. His music was removed from her tour playlists. It was as if he no longer existed in her world. Sixth, Elvis Costello, punk provocation. It was 1979. Cleveland was buzzing with energy. A major festival had drawn together icons and up-and-comers alike. Linda Ronstadt, fresh off a string of chart-topping albums, was one of the headliners. At the peak of her powers, she was an established force. That night, all eyes were on her, and one of them belonged to Elvis Costello. He was the new kid on the scene, brash, brilliant, barely filtered, punk rock's intellectual rebel with a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. In front of a cluster of reporters, Costello sneered, calling Linda's set background music for brunch. It was more than a jab, it was public humiliation. The comment spread quickly, and when Linda confronted him backstage, hoping for clarity or maybe even an apology, she got something else entirely. Costello, reportedly drunk and arrogant, looked her in the eye, threw another cold insult, and walked off without a word of remorse. Linda never looked back. To her, Elvis Costello represented something bigger than just one rude remark. He embodied a new kind of artist, clever, but heartless, critical, without compassion, not rebellious, just cruel for the sake of it. Seventh, Paul Simon, perfection or control. In 1982, it seemed like the perfect collaboration. Paul Simon, one of the most respected songwriters of his time, and Linda Ronstadt, the reigning queen of genre-defying vocals. When she agreed to duet with him for his upcoming album, fans and industry insiders alike buzzed with excitement on paper. It was a dream. In reality, it was a slow, burning nightmare. From the first rehearsal, things felt off. Simon nitpicked her delivery, interrupting takes to correct phrasing that didn't need fixing. He rewrote lyrics without consulting her and offered vocal advice that felt more like thinly veiled criticism. According to those close to Linda, she later described the experience as feeling like being scolded by a principal. Every note she sang was met with scrutiny, not support. The chemistry never materialized. The creative spark fizzled under the weight of ego and condescension. The song was ultimately shelved, unfinished, unreleased, unspoken of for years. But for Linda, the damage wasn't about one track. It was about being treated as less than a voice like hers, a legacy like hers, deserved a partner. Instead, she got a dictator. After that, she made a quiet promise to herself. She would never step into a studio with Paul Simon again. And with that final fracture, Linda Ronstadt's silence on her biggest betrayals had officially unraveled. 7 musicians, 7 scars, all hidden behind decades of elegance. Until now. Linda Ronstadt has never been one to feed the gossip machine. For decades, she let the music speak. But these revelations aren't about revenge. They're about truth. She built her legacy not just on talent, but on surviving egos, betrayals, in a ruthless industry. And in finally telling these stories, she's not tearing others down, she's lifting a veil. Because sometimes the greatest strength isn't in the songs we sing, it's in the silence we choose to break.